what I want to do today is I want to give you guys 5 ways that we fight for the longevity of ministry. We fight for our health. We fight for the ability to have the broad shoulders to carry the burden that it is. Some of this is going to be targeted directly at the lead guy that's in the chair. I mean, nobody else can do this stuff for you. There's going to be a few other things that look a little more like they're going to be geared toward people that are around that lead guy to help him with some of these things. So 5 things that help you fight, understanding that it is an uphill battle and there are some things that are just pitfalls and kind of bombshells that are out there as lead pastors are preaching.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Hey guys, welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Andrew Hopper from Mercy Hill Church, and Breaking Barriers is a ministry of Mercy Hill where we help churches grow so that they can go. And today, we're going to talk about something that is probably as important as anything else that we could talk about, and that is the health of preachers. And how that plays in to the growing and the going of our churches. I want to talk today about the guy that's in the lead chair or the preaching pastor chair. At Mercy Hill, we talk about elders and pastors. We use that term synonymously, and there are lay pastors, there are pastors that are on staff, but today I want to talk about that pastoral position that comes with the majority, the vast majority even, of the preaching load. And it's very important that we talk about the health of this particular guy and the people around him understanding what he's carrying, because here's the reality. Sometimes preachers and their boards or their deacon teams or the staff around them, sometimes they are shocked by the physical and emotional problems that come with that job. And we really shouldn't be. We should almost expect it because of what that job entails and what that guy is carrying. I mean, just think about it for a moment, y'all. The guy that's sitting in that chair preaching the majority of the time has entered into a physically and mentally taxing profession that happens also to invite the fiercest attacks from our spiritual enemy. I mean, what did we think was going to happen? When we see things like depression, anxiety, when we see immune suppression and sickness come, like, what did we think was going to happen? I think it's very important for the pastor to realize, hey, this is par for the course. It's part of the job. So you better be intentional about all of these areas of your own health so that you can have shoulders that are broad enough to carry what you're going to be called to carry. And I also think it's important for staff, elders, deacon boards, that they listen up, because here's the deal, especially if you're listening to this, you're part of a staff, you're part of an elder board, something like that. Maybe you're not the guy that's carrying that load. You need to understand, in your church, there is a man in the arena, and he's doing something that nobody else is doing. And I think what we think is, well, what do you mean nobody else is doing it? Like, there are guys that preach, and we give him a break every 6 or 7 weeks or whatever, and because maybe you or somebody else on the staff has preached in one-off settings every 6-7 weeks or maybe a couple of times a year, what we think is, well, the way I feel after I get done with that is the way that a pastor feels when he's doing it more often, and that's where the mistake comes. The problem is never the first, second, or third weekend in a row. The problem is 7, 8, 9, and 10, 40 weekends or 45 weekends a year, and there is something that begins to happen mentally and physically, and chances are in your organization, there is one guy that is in that arena that is carrying the bulk of that for the organization. And listen, he's not a victim in that. Man, this is my chair. I'm not a victim in it. I choose it every single day. I'm passionate about it. Jeremiah 20, verse 9 says, and I feel like this many times, like Jeremiah, many preachers do, there's a fire that is shut up in my bones. There is a zeal for the house of the Lord that is consuming me, the Psalms say. And that is true for so many preachers. I mean, it's not... The podcast is not about, man, poor that guy or woe is me. The podcast is, we need the pastor, and we, the team, the family, the elder board around that pastor, need to see with clear eyes and a sober vision what it is that God is calling him to, what it is that he is carrying, so that we can make the appropriate adjustments and prioritize things in his life and in his job so that he can remain healthy over the long haul and do that job. Here's the paradox, okay? Lead pastor, let me talk to you. Preaching is the most healthy thing you do for your church, but one of the most unhealthy things that you do for your own physical body. Now, that's a paradox, isn't it? I'm not saying it's not great for your heart and soul. I've already mentioned this. I don't need to keep saying it over and over. I love it. You love it. We're passionate about it. But here is and we know, and listen, we know it's important for the church, all right? I think the preaching event is the most important, hour of the week for evangelism and discipleship in our church. I think it moves the needle for those two things more than any other thing that we do. And yet it is so healthy for the church, but the actual physical act over and over and over again, it's something that's fun. It's something that we love. It's something that we're passionate about. It doesn't mean it's not costing you something, brother. Not when we do it once or twice, but long stretches over weeks, multiple services, months, over years. It is a grind. And so we need to just see that with, I think, a very sober mind. And we need to see it for what it is. The preaching event I have likened to, over time, months and months, years and years, multiple services on the weekend, all of that. I liken it to being a coal miner 100 years ago, okay? If you're a coal miner 100 years ago, if that's your profession, y'all, black lung is just sort of part of the deal. And with preaching comes, I think in some ways, sort of the black lung of a lot of things, depression, anxiety, immune suppression that ends up leading to sicknesses, short life. I mean, think about the greats that we even celebrate. Think about D. Martin Lloyd-Jones. Think about Charles Spurgeon. Think about the massive problems that they had with depression and physical health. I mean, lead pastor, you're in that chair, you're preaching. The reality is, man, you're a work dog. But here's the thing about work dogs, and I have one. I've got one at my house. She's a work dog. She's a hog hunting dog, okay? The thing about work dogs is they don't live very long. They go hard, they burn out. And for many of us, that is going to be, if we're not careful, that is going to be our story. I can think right now, I'm not going to say names, but I just thought in 2 minutes, 5 to 7 names of guys that I know right now that have faced major breakdowns emotionally or with their physical health. And I think much of it is because of the physical and mental and spiritual toll that week in and week out the preaching event kind of puts on us. I mean, how many books can I name right now? I mean, think about it. You think about Leading on Empty, Wayne Cordero. You think about Out of the Cave, Chris Hodges. You think about Reset by David Murray. Brothers, I just don't want us to be obtuse. We are doing something to ourselves. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. Although I'll say this plainly, I'm not sure that any of those people would have a better read on this than somebody who's doing it for a living, which we are. But I think I'm onto something here when I tell you, number one, the preaching event is more physically demanding than we give it credit for. If you preach I would challenge you to do this, man. I did this years ago and then I've done it again recently, but I remember when I did it years ago, I wired, I was wearing a Fitbit then. I haven't for a few years. I'm kind of back on it now. But back when I was doing it, I remember looking at my step count and all that stuff. And I would preach a 45-minute sermon and I would have walked the equivalent of 2 miles. Now that's for one sermon. Many of us have had seasons where we're preaching at least 2, sometimes as much as even 4 or 5 times on a weekend. I want you to imagine what that's like. It means you woke up on a Sunday morning and outside of any of the other stressors that you had coming at you that day, you were going to hike 8 to 10 miles, listen, on a stage in front of a crowd with extreme focus. I don't know if you realize this, but walking that 8 or 10 miles on a weekend is not a leisurely stroll in the park. You're walking on a freaking tightrope. That's the amount of focus that you're having to burn, the amount of time that you're walking that 8 miles. What do you think that does to your body? What do you think that does to your mind? I mean, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. This would be more of a doctor thing, but we could just, what is it? It's a stress response. It is a triggering of the sympathetic nervous system. You have cortisol levels spiking, extreme mental fatigue. This is what's going on. Your blood pressure is sky high. Man, your heart rate is up. When you are preaching, you are in fight or flight. It is not parasympathetic. It is not calm. That process of going into fight or flight and then coming out of it again creates a load on your system. And most of the time, this is the thing. Most of the time when we go into fight or flight mode, okay, it's like, man, you see a snake in the yard and boom, your heart rate spikes. Man, you start sweating, your blood pressure's up. And God has given us that in order to be able to, run from lions and get away from danger and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, a lot of times that stuff calms down pretty fast because it's like, boom, saw a snake in the yard, dealt with it, or saw a snake in the yard and it ran away, or man, all of a sudden I saw my child fall on a bicycle and boom, you're all of a sudden thrown into this fight or flight and everything's crazy, but it resolves fairly quickly. A lot of times in life, our problems physiologically come whenever we get stuck in fight or flight and we can't get out of it. Now, this is not just from preaching, obviously, okay? There are other jobs, there are other professions. You think about military situations. You think about maybe a diagnosis with a child that puts you in to that really heightened state for days or weeks or months. But many times, other physical problems, like a profound spike in, plateauing of blood pressure or sleep problems or immune suppression, or, those things can come from a long time of a heightened kind of sense of fight or flight. And this is what I'm saying about preaching. In preaching, there is a defined amount of time that we are entering that world and stepping on that tightrope. And it's not just every weekend. For most times, for a lead pastor that's in that preaching seat, it's over and over and over during the week. And then it's certainly over a long, protracted amount of time on the weekend as you're preaching for 2 or 3 or even 4 services. I guess all I'm saying is this. If 100 years ago your profession is going into the coal mine, black lung is part of the deal. And right now, if your profession is, man, I'm going to trigger and I'm going to engage and unengage my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system over and over and over and over again, then, I don't know, things that are associated with that, poor health, depression, anxiety, poor sleep, those things can begin, obviously, to creep up in our life as well. Now, I want to make sure you understand this, and I said this earlier. In no way am I complaining about this. I'm just calling it what it is. And here's the problem. When people don't call it for what it is, they fail to realize, lead pastor, you're probably acting kind of like a CEO. And I don't care if your church is 100 people or 1,000. You're sort of acting like the CEO of an organization all week long who then moonlights as a preacher on the weekend. Well, here's the problem with that. CEOs that actually CEO all week long, they golf on the weekends. Okay, so they're doing something on the weekend that triggers parasympathetic. I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to calm. I'm trying to hook the trickle charger back up to this body, mind, and soul. Well, for us, we CEO all week, and then we end up triggering the sympathetic nervous system. And we go fight or flight as hard as you possibly could on the weekends. I'm not complaining about it. I'm calling it what it is. If that is true, and it is also true that God has called us to this, and it is our passion, and as Jeremiah said, there is a fire that is in our bones, then we need to do, and those around us need to do, whatever it is that is necessary to help us carry the burden that preaching is, and it is a burden. We've got a lot of friends at Mercy Hill that are firefighters. They're police officers. Man, they're guys that live this world in a way that none of us, pastors included, have even ever dreamed of. But I think about in their life, these guys know on a moment's notice we're going to be called to run into a burning building. And so you know what they make sure they can do? A bunch of push-ups. They make sure that they are skilled with all the equipment. They make sure that they can run probably a 6 or 7 minute mile, no problem. Maybe some of them can do that with all their gear on. Why? Because they understand what the job demands. And I think some of what we see in burnout and some of what we see in incredibly unhealthy situations, it's almost as if we didn't realize what this job demands. And what we need is a sober look at going down into the coal mine and understanding that it is going to come with some significant issues that we need to be ready for. And I think many times, like whenever we get hit with these issues, I know this is true in my life, when I've been hit with panic situations, when I've been hit with depression or anxiety and things like that, what I want to do is look back and I want to really beat myself up that I didn't get myself in the right shape for the job that I'm doing. And I think what we need to do is get out of that mindset. We don't beat ourselves up about it. We realize that's part of the gig. So don't beat yourself up. We just need to go back way upstream and tinker and change some things around so that we can get ourselves in a better position of health the next time. Like I said, man, you're in this seat, you're leading a church, you're preaching all the time, you're a work dog. But we got to understand that work dogs don't live very long. If we are going to make it over the long haul, it's going to have to be something that we are incredibly intentional in and we fight for. All right. What I want to do today is I want to give you guys 5 ways that we fight for the longevity of ministry. We fight for our health. We fight for the ability to have the broad shoulders to carry the burden that it is. Some of this is going to be targeted directly at the lead guy that's in the chair. I mean, nobody else can do this stuff for you. There's going to be a few other things that look a little more like they're going to be geared toward people that are around that lead guy to help him with some of these things. So 5 things that help you fight, understanding that it is an uphill battle and there are some things that are just pitfalls and kind of bombshells that are out there as lead pastors are preaching. All right, number 1. Because preaching is such a physical and mentally taxing deal, you have got to prioritize your physical health. I think the stereotype of the preacher in years past has been a guy that's pretty out of shape. I don't know that that's a stereotype now, but I will say that if we're going to be going in and out of these environments all the time that put us in fight or flight, the best thing that we can do right on the front is to try to be physically healthy. Remember from Genesis 2:7, you are both breath and dust. We cannot afford to focus solely on our spiritual health when the job itself is so demanding physically. I don't mean demanding as in you're laying bricks with your body. What I'm, laying bricks or working on a car or you're out in the hot sun roofing. That's not exactly what I mean. But what I mean is there is a, walking hours on that tightrope in front of people. It elicits a physiological response. And in so doing, it is a physically demanding job. You could say it like this. Preachers overwork their sympathetic nervous system, period. Clock it. Okay? It's just a fact. It is what it is. Because of, and I already talked about that a good bit. Since that's the case, we must counter that by working hard on things that help us restore balance. Like, and this is just, these are just the simplest things in the world. I mean, just go ahead and Google, like, how do you restore balance to an overworked sympathetic nervous system? It's just the easiest thing in the world. Pretty much diet, exercise, and rest. Good nutrition, tons of sleep, good cardio. Cardio is one of the only things proven to help with spikes in cortisol levels and strength training. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. It's a pretty simple formula, and we know it. It's always coming back to that 3-legged stool of diet, exercise, and rest. Now, it's simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. It's not going to happen without a ton of commitment, but it is pretty simple. Pastors, we need to realize that what we are doing is an incredibly physically demanding job, and because of that, we need to make sure that we are taking care of that part that God gave us of ourselves that is the physical body. Man, if you're a lead pastor or you are a board overseeing a lead pastor, the questions I would have are you prioritizing or can you help him prioritize his physical health? Now, one of the ways we think about this, pastors a lot of times say, well, I don't have time to do that. Well, make time. And part of the way that you can make time is by sort of getting over the guilt gene and realizing that if you're carrying a weight nobody else carries, you should have a flexibility nobody else has. One of the pastors of one of the awesome Breaking Barriers churches, blowing and going, people getting saved. They've been at it now for maybe 15 years, and just incredible. And I was talking to him, and he's in great shape. He understands what I'm talking about here. Prioritize your physical health. It's a serious job. It's a demanding job. If a firefighter needs to be able to do 100 push-ups, the pastor needs to be able to do some things like that as well and have some goals. And I said to him, well, man, what's your routine? He said, well, my routine is this. A couple years ago, I don't do lunch with anybody anymore. I go work out every day over lunch. Now, what's funny about that is, if I say that to some groups of pastors, they would roll their eyes. Well, my people, that's when they're off. And, people need to be able to eat lunch with the pastor. And, I want to be available to the people and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that's wrong. And I don't do exactly what this guy did, but the commitment to say my physical health and long-term in ministry, that is going to matter so much more than taking a lunch meeting or two every single week, to me shows an incredible amount of maturity. He's carrying a weight nobody else is carrying. He's going to cash in on a flexibility that nobody else has. He's going to move things around in order to get this done. Now, nobody is saying, I think this is funny. Okay. No, I'm certainly not saying, nobody's saying you need to look like John Cena or have the abs of the Liver King. Okay. And I know he's all clean, no steroids, but generally speaking, I think what we've got to do is say, man, are we making an effort? And I think one of the ways to make an effort is just say, hey, what are your goals? What are you tracking? I'm not throwing this all on you in one big junk drawer, but it's like, hey, are there some things that you're thinking about? Do you know what kind of steps you're getting? Are you looking at your macros? Do you think about, man, I want to have 3 or 4 days in the gym? Where are you this year compared to where you were last year? And do you even know? Are you stronger? Are you leaner? Are you faster? Are you something more this year than you were last year? Because if we can't even answer those questions or what goals we're going after, you've got to ask the question then, are these areas being neglected? Are we taking note of what we eat? Are we thinking about sleep hygiene? Lead pastor, you do not many of us, unlike a CEO, we don't play golf on the weekend. We preach on the weekend. And preaching is one of the more intense things that we do. If we're going to be ready for that, it's going to come from prioritizing our physical health. Now, resting is part of our physical health, but I want to talk about it in a more broad way. The second thing I would say here today is this. Hey, if you want to make sure that you can be in it to win it, stay in, man, that work dog don't die early, okay? Best that we can affect change and best that we can control it. I'm going to call you to rest hard. Lord knows you preach hard. Lord knows you go hard at work. Are we resting just as hard? The question here is, are we making room for exercise and making room for resting and all that kind of stuff? I think some guys might question right off the bat, is this just a luxury for larger churches? And I would say, hey, wait a minute. If you're not healthy, those are from decisions, not conditions. Decisions, not conditions. It ain't nobody else's fault. If the fruit is bad, the watering schedule needs to change. And if you're a church of 100 or a church of 1,000, that doesn't really matter. What the issue is, what decisions are we going to make in order to put ourselves in a position where we are trying to counter, this mountain that we're climbing and reach some balance with our health. One of the things I would say is this. Okay, rest hard. One of the things I would say is the illustration that caught me was an illustration where a guy was talking about, hey, think about your mind and, think about your mind like you would think about your bicep. What if I told you today, Pastor, I said, hey, I want you to walk around with a clenched bicep all day long. I want you to act like your 10-year-old little boy just came in the room and you flexed for him as hard as you could to make him think you were the man. And then instead of holding that flex for 3 seconds, you just held it for 3 hours or for 30 hours. Man, you held it all day long. You figured out a way to, or even when you slept, it was going to be still kind of, crunched up and it was still going to be flexed. What would happen if you flexed your bicep all day long, every day, even for one day? Cramps, fatigue, eventual injury. I want you to think about your mind as that muscle that we just clench in the morning and don't let it go until the evening. And what's happening? Fatigue, cramps, eventual injury. And I would say this, just like your arm, your mind needs time to shake loose. Man, your mind needs time to get the feeling back. Daily it needs that time. Weekly it needs that time. Yearly, every few years, sabbatical, that type of thing. It needs that time. We are on the tightrope, focusing as hard as we can. And what we need is times to shake loose. You can't clench that bicep all day long. Take breaks. One of the things I would say is this: if you have nothing meaningful to work on that's not going to move the needle, do not fill that time with busy work that means nothing and will drain your tank even more. Instead, try hard to hook the brain, the soul, the heart, the mind up to the trickle charger and let it relax and let it recharge. Weekly, I think, man, rest hard. Are you taking time off for real? Or is there time where you're like, dude, I don't care about the email. Man, I don't care about checking Teams. I'm not worried about this. I'm not calling that guy back today. And some people look at that and you say, well, that's laziness. No, it's not laziness. I've already kind of conceded that guys that go down this road, many of them, not everybody, but many of them are work dogs. And I'm not saying lazy. What I'm saying is I want to be smart. And I want to understand that if the job is out to get me, I need to make sure that I'm playing defense pretty well. I want to be smart about this. The mind needs to relax now so that it can be sharp later. Another thing that we think about at Mercy Hill, we already did a podcast on this, but we think about sabbatical, some rhythm of taking time to sharpen the axe by getting your mind away from it all and just letting the mind heal because it has been injured. Preaching overtaxes the sympathetic nervous system. You are injuring yourself. So, man, you don't take your ball and go home. It doesn't mean we're not called. We got passion in our bones. We need time to heal. We need time to refresh. We need time to recharge. Listen, the only way to stay healthy over a long period of time is to be able to spend the time that we need with the trickle charger hooked up. I remember when I was a kid, I learned about, just different things around the property and we, cranking up a lawnmower, or a battery had died somewhere or whatever, and you get another car and you jump start it and that kind of thing. But the other thing you would do is, you wanted to start a car the next morning, you would have to put it on a trickle charger. Or maybe some of you guys have any kind of diesel, like you got a tractor, engine or something like that, and that thing don't want to hold a charge all night in the cold weather. What do? You put a trickle charger on it. The reality is that our bodies, our minds, they're really set up for a trickle charge. And so you got to have the time that it takes to charge back up. And it's not going to happen overnight. And there really aren't any shortcuts in it. The third thing I would say is this, y'all. We want to count minutes on the floor, not games played. So remember, the whole point of this podcast is talking about preachers. It's not just talking about elders and pastors, but preaching pastors in particular. And many times we ask what I think ends up being sort of the one of the worst questions that we could ask. It's honestly kind of worthless when we're trying to get to the bottom of how much a guy's preaching and how much they're subjecting themselves to. And we say something like this: well, how many weekends are you preaching in a year? Well, that is wholly irrelevant if we don't know how many times they're preaching in a year. One guy preaches 40 times a year, but he's only preaching one sermon. Another guy preaches 30 times a year, but he preaches 3 times a weekend. So it's way more. Now, a better question, still a little bit in the worthless camp maybe, but a better question is, how many sermons do you preach a year? But, again, there's flaws to that, right? Because somebody might preach a sermon for an hour. Somebody might preach a sermon for 30 minutes. The best question is, and this is where I got this from Larry Osborne, the best question is, don't count games played, count minutes on the floor. And this one really does vary from person to person, okay? When you're thinking about the minutes that you're on the floor, the amount of time that you're up there walking on that tightrope, here's what I would tell you today. Generally speaking, I can't be specific because this is very generalized. It's going to vary from person to person. I can't say this many or this many because this is different. People have different thresholds for this stuff. But generally speaking, and I think this trend is growing among churches right now, guys are probably preaching too much, not too little. Okay, meaning you could probably have the same effect by preaching less sermons, less minutes on the floor. It's going to affect the congregation and the growing and going in the same way, but as you're taking yourself off the floor, you're going to have more time to rest, recover, and get ready to do it again. I remember when we were planting Mercy Hill in the first few years at Mercy Hill, I remember thinking, well, I'm only going to preach 40 times a year. And I thought that was pretty good for a church plant. I preach less than that now, but I just thought, hey, this is a brand new church plant. Me preaching 40 times a year, that's good. It's giving other guys a chance to preach. It's teaching the church that it's not me, all about me, every single weekend and all that. What I failed to realize is by year 2, we're running 4 services every weekend. So yeah, I'm quote unquote only preaching 40 weekends a year, but I'm preaching 4 services every weekend that I do that. That wasn't smart. I wasn't thinking about it like minutes on the floor. I was thinking about it like weekends, and it's just not apples and apples. Now, I can't give you a perfect guide for what you should do in this area, for how many minutes you should play. But here's what I think. You probably need to ask yourself the question, how many minutes do I need to be on the floor for our organization, to be successful, for the church to continue to grow and go? And whatever that minimum is that you think and your team thinks, man, I would go ahead and start gravitating towards that minimum rather than preaching a bunch of services, some of them being ones that honestly, it didn't matter that you were there. Another guy could have taken that rep. It wouldn't have affected the organization, but it did affect you. The fourth of 5 things that I'll mention on this podcast today is that we need to be okay with wearing the red jersey. So let me give you a good football illustration here. Again, I got this from Larry Osborne, but in football, wearing the red jersey means you don't hit that guy. This is true even at little 10-year-old football. Whenever I was coaching my son in 10U football this year, same thing, man. The quarterback, he's got a different jersey on than everybody else. Now, when you get at higher levels of football, often it might mean they don't condition like everybody else. Maybe they don't even lift like everybody else. They got their own program. Sometimes it means they come late and leave early, not because they're lazy, but because they got other things they need to do. They need to watch more film, or they need to work on some other things really specifically. In other words, they wear the red jersey, and the red jersey denotes there is a special designation that we all recognize. This guy needs to be treated in a different way, because if he goes down, it's a bigger deal to the organization than if someone else goes down. Now, this is the issue, okay? For any of us that have a blue-collar guilt gene is what we call it, all right? And a blue-collar, just quickly, recap here, blue-collar guilt gene is, man, you grew up seeing your dad get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, work a blue-collar job. Now, you don't have that type of job anymore. He had probably a physically demanding job, but your job is physically demanding in a different way. It's all about this nervous system stuff that I've been talking about, all of these stress responses and things like that you're going in and out of, but you don't take into account that laying brick or putting on a roof doesn't come with those nervous system reactions. And so what you're doing now is you're saying, well, I got to match that work ethic, and it works out, man, I got to be the one getting up at 4 a.m. I got to be the first one there and the last one to leave. Man, I got to make sure I have the smallest office in the organization so people know that I'm humble. I never want to drive a car that's newer than 20 years old, because I want people to know that I come from humble beginnings and I'm not pretentious and all these types of things. Now, if you got that blue-collar guilt gene, you can't stand, and I know this because it was me, okay? You can't stand the thought of putting on the red jersey, because, man, you don't have to just be like everybody else. You got to be the one out front being like everybody else. Man, you want to lead in being just like everybody else. It's a core part of who you are. And it doesn't matter that it's going to be better for the organization for you to stay healthy and be protected, because you got to be on the front line and can never, ever be the general that is back, in a booth somewhere sort of calling shots. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. We'll continue to talk about it. I think a lot of guys that listen to this podcast have dealt with this in their life. But here's the thing, that will hurt you because you don't want to put on the red jersey, even though you're getting hit more than everybody else. I mean, the whole point of a red jersey is not even so much, it is, that guy's more important. That's not really the point. The point is, we all know during the game, he's going to get hit more than everybody else, so don't let him get hit in practice. That's kind of the idea. You need to save taking those shots for when it really, really matters. And that's something that I would encourage you guys to think about. In what areas, team around that lead pastor or lead pastor, are there areas where the red jersey would be beneficial, but you don't want it? Let me give you an example. All right. I would, on the weekends forever here at Mercy Hill, man, I'd be trying to remember all the conversations I had with people, and man, I'd forget that I needed water, and I'd run back to the little green room, and I would do all this stuff. And I didn't have anybody with me as an assistant on the weekend because none of the other pastors did, and I didn't need that. blue collar work ethic. Man, I don't need somebody to take notes for me. I don't need somebody to run back in the green room and grab my inhaler if I need it. I can do all that myself. I don't have to have anybody else do that for me. And through a lot of working through this guilt gene and thinking about the red jersey, I finally flipped and got it in my mind that, wait a minute. If I do my job better, it's going to help everybody here. That's kind of how a quarterback is. And so I thought, okay, if I have an assistant on the weekend, an intern, or somebody on our staff that just volunteers 1 weekend a month to say, hey man, I'm with you. I'm your guy, dude. What do you need from me? We're going to pray together. I'm going to run around like a chicken with my head cut off if a slide is wrong. I'll be the one to run back and get your water if you forget it. If you can't find your Bible, which happens, I'm going to go run and find it. Like, man, these guys are going to show a lot of humility, and they're going to say, hey, I'll be that guy for you. And I start to realize, man, that is going to set me up to have a lot less stress around my weekend and what I'm trying to do. And that will give me, that'll take a little bit, they'll put a little bit back in the tank instead of that little bit coming out. And all that stuff can add up. Now, there are other things that you could think about like that. How can you wear the red jersey, and how does that play into, man, this guy is going to take more hits on the weekend. Let's try to preserve him during the week. Let's try to preserve what we can so that what's coming out is only the sermon and only the highest level of stress-inducing things, and we're kind of getting rid of a lot of these little foxes that want to take stuff from us. Wear the red jersey. And lastly, I would say, and this one probably is going to be one of the more controversial of this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I would call you to eliminate stress on the weekend in the best way that you can. And this one, listen, yes, this is for the guy that's going to be doing it. He's got to think about it this way. Man, in my opinion, he's got to get over that guilt gene enough to think about it this way. This is also for the team. This is going to be for those who are working around him, elder board, staff team, that kind of thing. This is also going to be for the family. This is going to be for wife. It's going to be for the kids, okay? Here's what you got to understand. When it's a preaching day, which for Mercy Hill is Thursdays and Sundays, when it's a preaching day, because of what we know is coming, because there are going to be hours on the tightrope. I mean, there's going to be hours of active zone minutes just from standing up on a stage and being laid bare. Okay, that all eyes are on you, and you're moving and you're talking and you're passionately conveying. All right, if that is going to be true, then here's the deal. Preaching days are not 50-50. It's not, man, dad's got 50% of the responsibilities today. Mom's got 50% of the responsibilities today. It's not lead pastor's got 50% of the responsibilities today, and the rest of the staff team takes 50% of the responsibility today. Oh, no. Preaching days are 100% all in, all family, all staff. We understand this dude's about to climb a mountain. And I can speak freely about these things because, I am so blessed and my family and at Mercy Hill to have a staff team, an elder team, and a wife and kids who understand that. Man, that I can say it out loud with confidence, and they don't hear that as, man, he's a prima donna. They don't see that as, man, he thinks what he's doing is bigger than what it is. They have, in a sober-minded way, realized, man, on these days, he's entering the spiritual battle, about to walk a tightrope, and it's a long climb. And so we're going to try to do everything that we can. You could say it like this. The whole family, the whole team is going to go all in because they know what's about to happen. And guys, I think that you need to be thinking about it this way. Hey, it's the same. It's the guys that are thinking like, man, we don't want to do a green room. That's too pretentious. You're missing it here. It's the guys that think, well, I don't want to have the church buy, a bunch of like good, healthy snacks and make sure there's waters or Gatorades or decaf coffee because I don't want to be all jazzed up. Like, I want to have all that stuff lined up. But no. It's not that important. That makes me seem kind of like I'm a little bit of a prima donna. I would submit to you that you have not taken into account how stressful the preaching event is. And if there is anything that family and church can do to help bring that stress level down, then man, then we need to do that. Man, my wife carries a lot of the load of this on the weekend, and I would encourage wives to hear this as well. The reality is on Thursdays, I'm not picking kids up from practice. On Thursdays, if one of them has a little temperature, I'm probably not even going to know about it until I get home after the service. If there's a clogged sink, I'm not going to know about it during the day. I mean, this is what I mean. Sunday mornings, man, I'm not helping the kids get ready. I'm not worried about what we're eating for breakfast. And that's not because I'm a Neanderthal. It's because Anna has a very sober view of what I'm about to do. This is so funny. Every single Thursday of my life, because on Thursdays is not just a preaching day. Thursday is a script day and a preaching day. So a lot of the hay's in the barn by Thursday, but the script isn't done. And I write the script on Thursday morning, and then we preach it Thursday night. And sometime between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., I'll look at Anna just about every Thursday that I'm up, and I'll say, babe, I got to climb a mountain today. And she'll look right back at me, and she'll say, you got this. Every single Thursday. It's the same thing. On a Sunday, Anna does an incredible job of understanding, hey, that dude's about to climb a mountain today. Okay, and so what I'm going to do, and there are other days in her life where she's climbing the mountain, and I'm the one helping. I understand that. But on these days, he's about to climb that mountain today. And so, because he's about to climb that mountain, I need to do everything I can do to eliminate the small foxes of stress that are around him today. Same thing with the team, man. Our team, and this goes for big church or small church. I think a lot of times the churches are not they've got to be taught this. Man, I got a mountain to climb today. Don't call me because there's something going on in the sink is clogged in the kids' bathroom at the church. Don't call me because this so-and-so person got upset this morning because of something that was said, and I'm going into the second service, but they want to make sure that I already know about it. We don't need that. But here's the deal. Some guys, I think, have too much pride to have everyone in their life move things around to make that time easier for them. And honestly, they're probably suffering for it. Are there ways that you can eliminate stress for that dude that's in the arena? Or there are ways that you could think about challenging your family, and you could think about ways that you can eliminate stress. Guys, I hope this has been helpful. Man, it's a great discussion. I would love to hear your feedback. You can let me know on our Breaking Barriers Facebook group. We could talk all about this stuff and maybe even get into more pragmatics around it. Thanks a lot.